All right, so I just finished watching the first episode of The Wheel of Time. I'm sitting here on my couch. I'm recording into my phone because before I go over to my computer and turn it on and get everything set up and get my microphone placement in place, whatever that means, I wanted to just give my first impressions real quick before we really get into this episode. And this was amazing. There are some big changes in this episode they're quite different from the book. And I really want to try to do this episode about the show and not what's different from the books. But I may not fully be able to do that, because once you've lived with these books for 25 years, it's really hard not to make a comparison. And honestly, at first, as I'm watching this, I was a little thrown by some of the changes, because they're fairly big, and we'll get into those later. But by the time the Trollocs attack the village, I was completely won over. This show, just this first episode, is a bit different than the books, and yet so much like the books at the same time. It was an amazing feeling watching this episode, because 25 years, it's been at least 25 years since I've read the first book, or since I read the first book for the first time, since I was introduced to this world. And it has been my all-time favorite fantasy series, even though, again, I've mentioned this before, I've never finished it. I've still got 2 books to go. It's still my all-time favorite fantasy series, and just series of books in general. And they have been for over 2 decades. And to finally see this in live action, and it's nothing like what I always pictured in my head when I read the books. I'm sure there's going to be people all over the internet today and tomorrow and next week talking about how this is exactly how I pictured it in my mind. And this is not at all. I mean, there's some parts of it that feel like how I was picturing it when I read the book. But in general, none of this is like how I pictured it in my mind. And yet it is so good. The Trollocs are, oh my gosh, they are perfect. We get to see Tam fighting with his sword, which you don't get at all for a long time in the books, as far as I can remember. And it was really, really good. And I'm really glad I decided to take the day off. So, yeah, if you haven't guessed yet, The Wheel of Time, Season 1, Episode 1, that's what we're talking about today on The Streaming Fool. That was dumb.